now we're talking about flavors. What is going on in Europe and in the rest of the world that we need to talk about it?
I'm convinced that if politicians and the anti-vaping groups could ban vaping in general, they would do it right away. But I think they missed the train a little bit. It's kind of similar with Uber, that too many people use it already, so they can't ban it right away and outright ban vaping. So they set a new target, and that is the flavors. And I think they know that if they ban flavors, it's kind of the end to vaping as we know it, because 2/3 of vapers are using some kind of flavor. So they know what they do, and they have in flavors the new attack.
If you introduce a prohibition on flavors, it's the same thing, and that's why I will agree with you. It's almost the same thing as banning flavors, as banning the products, banning e-cigarettes. So if you were clever enough, and unfortunately the industry was not clever enough over the past few years, they would have known since the beginning that flavors will eventually become a target. If you know the history of smoking where flavors were banned, and I agree with the ban on the flavors for tobacco products, I'm talking about cigarettes, then you would have known that this is the easiest target. It is a target that affects and involves kids, which is, you know, a very emotional debate and a very emotional argument that we want to protect kids. So it was known for years that eventually we're going to come to a position that we are today, where the initial political battle in the US concerning flavors has moved to Europe very aggressively and very rapidly. So now we have a very strong debate in several countries initially, and now in the European Union, to ban flavors. So the industry and especially the consumers need to understand that they will not have products to buy if flavors are banned. Everything will be completely different. Vaping is going to be much more difficult, much less joyful and enjoyable for vapers.
And nobody will stop smoking.
And I think several of them are going to risk relapsing back to smoking. So it is the #1 priority to convince the authorities, I mean, we all know that adult, former smoking e-cigarette users are using non-tobacco flavors, all of them.
To expand a little bit on the flavor ban in America, this did not happen today. Systematically and methodically, the government since 2015 have attempted to remove electronic cigarettes from the market. At first, in 2015, it was battery explosions. Battery explosions, people are dying, we need to ban electronic cigarettes. That didn't work. Then we had the nicotine addiction for the kids in 2017. Oh, the kids are getting hooked on nicotine. That didn't work. In 2019, 2020, we had EVALI. You know, so it's not just the flavors. The flavors is just a natural next step of eliminating the product without telling everybody that we're going to ban the product. So the United States was very smart. They said, well, we're not going to ban anything from the market, but you will have to apply to the FDA with a multi-million-dollar application and prove that your product, every individual product on the market, is a net public benefit for health. So in essence, even though they didn't ban the product, all these companies here, the independent companies, cannot afford to go through this process. And even the large, big tobacco companies that have applied to the FDA, no flavored product has been approved, or I should say authorized, to be on the market in America today. So in essence, every product in America right now is illegal that's being sold with flavors because nobody has gotten an authorization from the FDA. So it's not a ban, but in essence it's a ban. And exactly the same thing is coming with TBD3 here in Europe. People need to understand that unfortunately the East always tries to copy the West, and in good things, but also in bad things as well too.
I fully agree, and I think consumers need to raise their voice wherever they can. There is a study of European politicians about their knowledge of vaping, and 1/3 of all MEPs have no knowledge at all about any alternative nicotine product. and at the same time, those people want to regulate it. So for me, it's mind-baffling how you think you can regulate something you don't even know. So I think there is a huge opportunity also for consumers to inform them, and I think the most powerful thing is to tell our own stories, because they can't dismiss our personal stories. And I used to work in the German parliament, and I always thought when politicians receive those personal emails and stories, they will just delete it and ignore it. But if they receive a certain amount of those kind of emails, that changes. Then they need to think of it and need to look into the issue a little bit, and it's not so hard to understand that vaping is less harmful than smoking. And that's what we try to do, to make it for the consumer as easy as possible to get in touch with the politicians. And on the other side, also to raise awareness in the general public. So at the moment we are running the Flavours Matter campaign, where we go into the countries where they are discussing at the moment the flavor bans, to try to stop that, also in light of the upcoming Tobacco Products Directive, because then those countries will play a huge role in the general regulation for whole Europe. So those are the two things we try to do with our campaigns: make it as easy as possible for consumers to get in touch with politicians and encourage them to tell their own stories, but also raise awareness for the issue in the general public with on-the-ground activities. We were in Brussels, we were in Stockholm, in The Hague, where all flavor bans are discussed already. And there are more countries coming, so I encourage everyone to check that out and just get in touch with the politicians. That is the most powerful thing we as consumers can do, I think.
The industry here in Europe needs to bond together on a country-by-country basis, but also as a pan-European association through the existing groups, and raise a significant amount of money to combat what is coming with the TPD3. We need more research, we need more science, because at some point, the science evidence becomes such a huge mountain that not even politicians can overcome it. So we need to have that wall to be able to protect the industry in the future. So the consumer, of course, is very, very important, but also the industry to be able to continue to fund to protect the industry for the future.
You know, politicians don't know anything about vaping. Not just 1/3 of them, most of them. They have no idea. It's a matter of who is trying to influence them and how. The tobacco control movement, unfortunately, is not a scientific movement. Most of it is mostly a political movement with a political agenda of prohibition. That's the reality, unfortunately. And they have the power, they have the money, and they have the know-how to influence politicians. When you consider WHO as a health organization who should care about health, and you look at the messages discussing about nicotine and not about smoking, because they just want to put under the same umbrella all nicotine products, and they don't even care which one is more harmful or least harmful, then you understand that this is a political approach, it's not a scientific approach. And yeah, you need politicians and politics because it's politicians who regulate, but you need to act like a scientist and look at the totality of evidence. The WHO has systematically cherry-picked evidence. They're just using whatever fits their agenda. They try to ignore everything else. You know, you cannot ignore science. They just try to ignore it through their reports. But it's going to fail. However, it needs a coordinated effort. A coordinated effort from the industry, of course, the consumers as a different independent, sector, because they have many advantages, and the scientists through a purely scientific approach, and not through an approach of manipulating or cherry-picking evidence in order to promote everyone's agenda. It is a tough battle, but I think, it's common sense. I think common sense should prevail, but it will not prevail unless we are very, very active, unless we wake up now, all of us, scientists, consumers, the industry, and we act very rapidly, because I think it's already quite late. We don't have time. We need to act very rapidly, very aggressively, be very active, and, expose the truth. Expose what's happening with adult vapers, many of whom, maybe the majority, are former smokers. they need to understand that. Most of adult e-cigarette users are using non-tobacco flavors, at least one non-tobacco flavor on a regular basis. We know that unlike cigarettes where people smoke usually the same brand for a large number of years, with e-cigarettes, people like to experiment. They experience what we call a flavor fatigue or olfactory fatigue. It's a well-known, well-established scientific phenomenon where when you use the same flavor all the time, your receptors lose the sensitivity to the flavoring and you start not feeling the flavor itself. It starts becoming blunt. It starts it feels like it's a flavorless product. So it is very important for users to switch from one flavor to the other so that they will maintain their receptor sensitivity to the flavoring. This is a phenomenon that we wrote in a study we published back in 2013. But it's the phenomenon of olfactory fatigue is well known even before e-cigarettes were invented. But it is happening with e-cigarettes. And that's why flavors are important. Moreover, non-tobacco flavors is a further step away from tobacco cigarettes. And vapers start using non-tobacco flavors which are even more different from cigarettes than the tobacco flavored e-cigarettes are. So they're moving further away from tobacco cigarettes. This is going to prevent relapse. We already have studies showing that using non-tobacco flavors is associated with a higher odd of having quit smoking. So flavors are crucial. Every user knows that. Smokers will experience the need for flavors. I'll give you a very simple example. My mother, who is 73 years old, she was a 55 years smoker of menthol cigarettes. She's a vapor for the last 4 or 5 years, and she's using 2 flavors, cappuccino and berry. She's not using tobacco flavors. She has never used tobacco or menthol flavors, and she's 73 years old. So flavors are not about kids. Flavors are marketed for adults because adult vapors, adult former smoking vapors need non-tobacco flavors. This is a fact. We don't accept kids using cigarettes. There is a ban in Europe on the sales of these products to kids. This is what needs to be implemented. I don't understand why the politicians are admitting their failure to implement their own regulation, and just because of this failure, they have decided to punish adult vapers and punish also smokers who have a chance to quit and need the flavors, and they're not going to have flavor.
I mean, to be honest, especially those hardcore anti-vapers, I don't believe them, this argument that it's about kids. They just want to ban flavors and vaping for everyone. Because especially if we look at the numbers in the US, if you want to improve the life of kids, you should tackle definitely other areas of life. Huge problems with binge drinking, anxiety, suicide rates. So vaping flavors would probably be the last problem I would tackle as a politician if I really want to improve public health for kids' lives. So I don't really believe this argument about kids. And I mean, all statistics show there is no gateway from vaping to smoking. As we have heard, adults like flavors as well. We once did a protest where we gave out flavorless ice cream to adults and filmed the reaction. And surprisingly, it turns out adults like flavors too. So I don't really believe this argument. I think it's about something else, namely banning and fighting vaping in general for adults as well.
I had a delicious tiramisu last night in downtown Verona. It was great. It was all flavored, with coffee. But I want to point out something that nobody talks about. If they are banning electronic cigarettes so kids won't have access to them, what does that leave the market with? Cigarettes.
Of course.
So first we have to explain the relative harm. Even if a few kids are experimenting with electronic cigarettes, if we know based on the science that we have so far in the last 15 years of electronic cigarettes that they're at least 95% less harmful, where is the harm? If you remove this alternative choice, kids are going to continue to experiment with the only product that's left on the market, and that's going to be combustible cigarettes. So it's a double bad benefit for public health in Europe in general.
The argument of the vaping epidemic is also false because we have seen and we have published research on that using surveys that the CDC has done in the US, that the vast majority of e-cigarette use among adolescents is experimentation. It's not regular daily use. And the vast majority of regular or daily users have been smoking or are still smokers. It's extremely rare to find a regular vapor among high school or lower kids, to find a vapor who has never smoked. You can't find people like that. Most of the kids who are using e-cigarettes regularly, they have experimented or have used tobacco cigarettes too. So there is no vaping epidemic, there is no getaway effect. In Europe, I don't think we have the same level of experimentation at all. So I fully agree, it's just an excuse. The target is the e-cigarette as a product. They know that through Flavours they can effectively ban the product. It's not about the kids. No one has convinced us that it's about the kids. I mean, convinced us through evidence. And they're just using this as an emotional argument to make it a sensitive matter for parents, for the society, to show that they are, very sensitive towards the kids. But it's not about that. It's a direct punishment for adult smokers and for former smokers who have managed to quit with the cigarettes.
And more so here, where, as Dr. Farsalinos said, electronic cigarettes have been regulated since 2016. We have laws existing in Europe for the sale of these products to minors. There are fines, there are penalties. At the end of the day, there's parents. Where are the parents to talk to their kids? We have the TPD, we have a nicotine cap. So our industry needs to come together, especially here in Europe now. We know what's coming, and get organized now and have the evidence and have the consumers all educated, all the business owners that are sitting here, get organized and fight what we know is coming, and it's a de facto ban on the vaping industry as we know it.